In the midst of delivering a profound message, something unexpected took place. The room, filled with eager hearts and anticipating minds, suddenly shifted. A moment that was meant to be filled with powerful words, inspiration, and guidance turned into something no one could have foreseen. The energy in the atmosphere, once electrified with the movement of faith, was now charged with a different kind of concern. It's in moments like these that life reminds us of its unpredictability, its suddenness. You see, we all face moments when the path we're walking on is interrupted. Life doesn't always give us a warning when things take a turn. One minute, you're strong, confident, and carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders. The next, you're caught off guard, grappling with something much larger than you can control. And yet, in these moments, there's a lesson waiting to be learned. It's not about the fall, but what you do when you find yourself on the ground. The true test of strength isn't just about power in the good times. It's about how you stand, how you rise, how you move when everything seems to be collapsing around you. The crowd may have felt the shock, but deep down there was a quiet knowing that even in this moment, strength was still being shaped. There's something about the unexpected that shapes your faith in ways nothing else can. It's in the surprise that we find new dimensions of our purpose, new wells of perseverance. When your body and spirit are tested, when the unforeseen hits without notice, that's when the deepest levels of resilience are built. It's in those moments of weakness, those times when you feel as if everything is slipping through your fingers, that you are being prepared for a greater purpose. That's when your character is forged. Strength is not just about overcoming in the moments you expect to win, but in the moments that challenge everything you thought you knew about yourself. The room was filled with more than just a sense of worry. It was filled with prayers, with the collective energy of belief that transcended fear. Sometimes it's not about the words you speak, but the silent strength you display. In moments of vulnerability, others witness the rawness of humanity, and it connects them in ways nothing else can. There's power in that unity, power in the strength of a people who know how to stand together, even when faced with the unknown. Even though uncertainty loomed, the spirit of perseverance remained unwavering. That's how it is with life. It may shake us, but it will never break us. When you think you can't go any further, that's when you discover the strength you never knew you had. It's easy to stay faithful when everything's going according to plan, but real faith shows up when things are outside of your control. The real victory is not in the absence of challenges, but in how you press on in the face of them. We are made not just for the high moments, but for the low valleys, the hard seasons, the unexpected tests. It's in these times that our faith is refined, our resolve is tested, and our hearts are deepened. Life may take unexpected turns, but the resilience we cultivate in these moments strengthens us for the journey ahead. When the unthinkable happens, it's not a sign of defeat, it's a call to rise higher. It's an invitation to dig deeper, to call upon a strength that surpasses what the eyes can see. And so while the unexpected may have startled us, it also became a moment for deeper faith, deeper unity, and a greater understanding of the power that lies within us all. In the midst of the storm, when everything around us begins to tremble, that's when true strength reveals itself. It's easy to have courage when the seas are calm, when the sky is clear, and when the road ahead is smooth. But when the unexpected hits, when the ground beneath you seems to shake, that's when your real power is unleashed. There's a strength that only shows up in the hard times, a type of resilience that can't be manufactured in comfort. It's forged in fire, shaped by pressure, and hardened by adversity. In those moments of vulnerability, when the body weakens and the mind feels overwhelmed, there's something powerful about choosing to rise. It's not about pretending the pain isn't real or ignoring the fear that tries to take hold. It's about facing it head on and continuing to stand even when you feel like sitting down. It's in these moments when the odds are stacked against you that your faith must become your anchor. Your faith isn't just about believing in the good times, it's about trusting even when you can't see the way forward. Resilience isn't simply about enduring, it's about thriving in the midst of difficulty. It's about taking what life throws at you and turning it into something that propels you forward. The strength to move through the hardest of trials is not found in our own power, but in the power we draw from something greater than ourselves. It's in those times when everything seems uncertain that you find an unwavering faith that carries you through. The beauty of resilience is that it doesn't require perfection. It doesn't require you to be unshaken, but rather it calls you to keep going even when you feel broken. Resilience is not about never falling, it's about rising every time you do. Even when the world around you is crumbling, resilience stands tall, rooted in the belief that no matter what happens, you will not be moved from your purpose. In these moments, there's a choice to be made. You can be consumed by the fear, or you can let your faith be the light that guides you through the darkness. It is in the most vulnerable of moments that your true power is revealed. When the circumstances are beyond your control, when you feel like you have nothing left to give, that's when the divine strength within you rises up. And in that moment, you're not just surviving, you're shining. True faith isn't just about what you believe when everything is going right. It's about what you choose to believe when everything is going wrong. It's in the midst of the storm that you see what you're really made of. The greater the adversity, the greater the opportunity for your faith to grow. It's when you keep moving forward, step by step, even when you don't have all the answers, that you see how deep your faith truly runs. Even in the face of vulnerability, when you're stripped of everything you thought you could rely on, there is something powerful about pressing on. The power to keep going, to keep trusting, to keep believing is the essence of true strength. It's the kind of strength that doesn't fade when the storm passes, but the kind that stands firm even when the winds are still howling. In the end, resilience isn't just about making it through the tough times. It's about allowing those tough times to transform you. It's about using the challenges as stepping stones to something greater. The tests that come our way are not meant to break us, but to build us into something stronger, something more powerful than we could have ever imagined. And when we press forward in faith, that strength becomes a testimony, a light for others to follow. When the storm hits, it's easy to feel isolated, as though the weight of the world is yours to carry alone. But that's when we need to remember that we are never truly alone. There's a power in unity, a strength in coming together, and a deep, unshakable power that comes from the collective prayer of the faithful. In times of crisis, when the unexpected disrupts our lives, we lean not just on our own understanding, but on the prayers of those who stand with us, who believe for us when we can't believe for ourselves. Prayer is not just a ritual. It's the very breath of our faith. It's the language of the Spirit, the way we communicate with a higher power that sees and knows all. And when we come together in prayer, we create an atmosphere where miracles are possible, where divine intervention can break through. It's not just the words we speak, but the faith behind those words, the belief that we are invoking a power greater than ourselves to intervene, heal, and restore. In the face of uncertainty, it is the prayer of the community that becomes a shield of protection. When one member of the body suffers, the whole body is affected, and so we pray. We stand in the gap for those in need, lifting them up with a faith that transcends distant circumstance. Whether we're in the same room or scattered across the globe, the connection we have through prayer is unbreakable. The energy of a praying community is a force that cannot be contained, and it reaches far beyond what the eye can see. Prayer is not just about asking for what we want, it's about aligning ourselves with God's will, trusting that His plan is greater than our own. It's in these moments of collective prayer that we submit our hearts and our desires to the will of a loving, omnipotent God who knows exactly what we need, even when we don't have the words to ask. In prayer, we find peace, comfort, and the assurance that no matter the outcome, God is in control. And it's not just the physical act of praying that brings strength, it's the support that comes from knowing others are lifting you up, carrying your burdens with you. When the world feels heavy, the strength of the community reminds us that we don't have to bear it alone. The prayers of the faithful are not just words, they are the lifeblood of hope that sustains us when we feel weak. We are stronger together than we ever could be apart. In moments of crisis, we also lean on the prayers of those we may never meet. The global body of believers, united in spirit, sends waves of prayer and support that ripple across the world. The love and faith of countless individuals connected through the power of prayer create a wave of energy that can move mountains, heal hearts, and restore what was broken. This kind of support doesn't just heal the body, it heals the soul. When we know we are surrounded by people who care, who are standing with us in faith, it lifts our spirits and renews our strength. The very act of knowing that others are praying for us is a comfort that cannot be replaced by anything else. It's in those prayers that we find our hope, our peace, and our ability to move forward. When we come together in prayer, we're not just asking for a miracle, we're declaring that we trust in God's power to intervene, to heal, and to restore. And even when we don't see the results right away, we trust that God is moving, working, and orchestrating things behind the scenes in ways that we cannot always understand. Our faith is not in the outcome, but in the one who holds the outcome in his hands. As the prayers continue, the faith continues to grow. Every word spoken, every thought of healing, every moment of belief builds upon the last, creating an atmosphere where God can move freely. We're not just praying for a person, we're praying for restoration, for peace, and for the power of divine intervention to manifest in real and tangible ways. In these moments, we become the living evidence of the power of prayer, standing together in faith, believing that all things are possible through Christ. Grace is not something we earn, it's something we receive. It's the unmerited favor of God given freely, not because we are deserving, but because of his love for us. It is in the hardest moments, in the times when we feel weakest, that we come to know the true power of grace. In our struggles, in our deepest moments of vulnerability, God's grace doesn't just carry us, it sustains us, strengthens us, and makes us whole again. Grace is what holds us together when everything else seems to be falling apart. In the midst of a crisis, grace isn't always something we can see right away, but it is always present, always working, even when we feel overwhelmed or uncertain. It's in the quiet moments of our pain, in the stillness of our most difficult battles, that grace surrounds us like a blanket, covering us in love and protection. And just when we think we can't take another step, we find ourselves standing, not in our own strength, but in the strength that only grace provides. God's grace is what makes the impossible possible. It is the reason we don't crumble under the weight of adversity, why we can continue to move forward, even when everything around us seems to be falling apart. It's the reminder that our strength does not come from our own efforts, but from the power of God working through us. His grace is a constant source of renewal, a well of strength that never runs dry, even in the hardest seasons. In moments of crisis, when we are at our most vulnerable, God's grace becomes even more evident. It's in these moments that we realize we don't have to have it all together. We don't have to be perfect. We don't have to have all the answers. We simply have to trust in God's grace to carry us through. It's grace that allows us to keep going when we don't feel like we have the strength to take another step. It's grace that sustains us when we are broken, when we are unsure, and when we are afraid. Grace is a reminder that God is with us even in our darkest moments. When we are weak, his grace makes us strong. When we are weary, his grace renews our energy. When we are lost, his grace is the guide that leads us home. There is nothing more powerful than the grace of God, because it's in grace that we find healing, hope, and the promise of restoration. It is grace that fills the gaps when we fall short, that picks us up when we stumble, and that comforts us when we are hurting. This moment is a living testimony to God's grace in action. It's a reminder that even when we face the unexpected, even when we find ourselves in the midst of a crisis, God's grace is there to carry us through. It's a testimony of his unchanging love, his constant presence, and his boundless mercy. Grace is not just a concept, it is the very essence of God's nature, working in and through us to make us whole, to make us strong, and to carry us forward. We are never alone, not because of our own strength, but because of the sustaining power of God's grace. It's the grace that meets us where we are, without judgment, without condemnation, and lifts us to a place of peace and strength. And when we look back on the difficult seasons, we will see the fingerprints of God's grace working behind the scenes, carrying us, strengthening us, and ultimately bringing us to a place of victory. The testimony of grace is a powerful one, because it's not based on what we do, but on what God has already done. It's in the crisis, in the moments of pain, that we see the true depth of his grace. And when we come through, not by our own power, but by the sustaining power of God's love, we know that grace has been at work all along, carrying us, renewing us, and giving us the strength to overcome. In times of unexpected challenges, it's not just about facing the crisis alone. It's about the power of those around you, the community that rallies together, and the support that comes from a shared commitment to care for one another. When the unthinkable happens, it's often the swift response of those who are prepared that makes all the difference. In moments of crisis, preparation and unity are not just nice to have, they are absolutely essential. They are the things that can transform a moment of fear into one of faith, a moment of chaos into one of calm. The medical personnel, trained and ready to act at a moment's notice, exemplified the very definition of preparedness. Their swift and effective response ensured that help arrived immediately without hesitation or delay. It's in moments like these that we see how vital it is to have people who are ready to step in, ready to serve, and ready to make a difference, even in the most challenging circumstances. Their training, their skill, and their commitment to the well-being of others became a lifeline in a moment of vulnerability. But it's not just the professionals who make a difference, it's the community that surrounds them. The congregation, standing together in faith, in prayer, and in support, demonstrated the true power of unity. When one member of the body is in need, the whole body responds. In that moment, the strength of the collective was evident. The prayers, the encouragement, and the quiet strength of the people who were there, ready to offer their support, were just as crucial as any medical intervention. There's an incredible force when people come together in faith, lifting each other up and carrying one another through the storm. The unity of the community is a reminder that we are stronger together than we are apart. When one person falters, the whole group steps in to provide the support that's needed. This unity is not just about physical presence, but about the shared belief that no one is left to face their challenges alone. It's a community where every member is valued, where every person's well-being matters, and where the strength of the group is greater than the sum of its parts. The preparation that was evident in the response wasn't just about having the right tools or the right team in place. It was about being ready to act with compassion, with empathy, and with a sense of urgency. In those moments of crisis, it's not enough to just be present. We must be ready to act. The community response was a reflection of the love and care that had been built long before the crisis ever hit. It's in the everyday acts of kindness and the moments of support that we prepare ourselves for the big challenges, for the times when the unexpected arrives and demands our attention. This is the essence of what it means to be a part of something greater than yourself. It's about knowing that no matter what comes your way, there are people who will stand with you, who will walk alongside you, and who will offer their support without hesitation. It's a reminder that we are never isolated, never abandoned, because the strength of a community is far more powerful than we often realize. The swift response wasn't just about addressing the immediate needs. It was about showing up, being present, and offering unwavering support in the face of uncertainty. It's a lesson in the power of preparation, in the importance of building a strong foundation of unity before the storm arrives. When we are prepared, when we stand together, we create an environment where challenges can be met with confidence, with courage, and with the faith that no matter what, we will overcome. In the end, it's the collective response that speaks volumes. It's not just the individual actions that matter, but the strength that comes from a unified group, a community committed to one another, willing to step in and help when the need arises. This is what makes us truly strong, not our ability to face adversity alone, but our willingness to face it together, to lift each other up and to carry one another through the toughest of times. When the unexpected happens, it can send shockwaves of fear through our hearts. Fear has a way of gripping us, shaking our confidence and clouding our vision. It makes us question everything, our strength, our future, and even the very foundation of our faith. But in those moments, we must remember that fear is not the end of the story. Fear may visit, but it doesn't have to stay. It doesn't have the power to control us unless we allow it. The real power lies in what we choose to do with that fear, how we respond, and whether we allow it to overshadow the promises of God. As news of the incident spread, fear began to sweep through, not just the community, but also those who had been inspired by the message of faith. But in the midst of that fear, something incredible happened. The very message that had been preached, the message of overcoming fear, of trusting in God's plan, began to resonate more deeply than ever before. It became a living testament to what had been shared, a call to rise above the fear, to trust that God's hand was still at work, even in the most uncertain of circumstances. Fear has a way of making us feel small, of making our problems feel insurmountable. It tricks us into thinking that we are alone, that we are facing something too big for us to handle. But when we stand in faith, we stand in the knowledge that we are never alone. We stand on the unshakable foundation that God's plan is always greater than the fear that tries to consume us. Fear may show up, but it has no authority over the destiny that God has prepared for us. In times of uncertainty, our faith must rise up and declare that God is still in control. The moment we choose to trust in His plan, fear begins to lose its grip on us. We might not always understand the why behind the storm, but we can always trust the who is guiding us through it. Faith isn't the absence of fear, it's the choice to move forward in spite of it, to trust that God is leading us, even when we don't have all the answers. The message of faith, the very message that had been shared with so many, became even more powerful in the face of this challenge. It wasn't just words anymore, it was a living truth. In that moment, the message of trusting in God's plan wasn't just a concept, it was a practice. It became the very thing that sustained those who were worried, those who were fearful, those who were uncertain. The power of faith is that it allows us to rise above our circumstances, to look beyond the immediate fear and see the bigger picture of God's divine purpose. Fear tells us that we are weak, that we are vulnerable, and that we cannot overcome the obstacles before us. But faith speaks a different truth. Faith declares that we are more than conquerors, that we have the strength to face anything that comes our way. Faith reminds us that God has equipped us for every challenge, that He has given us everything we need to endure, to overcome, and to rise above whatever fears threaten to hold us back. As the community stood in prayer and support, as the news spread far and wide, the power of faith shone brighter than any fear. The message that had always been about trusting in God's plan became a living testimony to that very truth. It was no longer just theory, it was practice. The people rose to the occasion, not in their own strength, but in the strength of God, trusting that He would carry them through. The choice to overcome fear with faith is not a one-time decision, it's a daily choice. It's choosing to speak faith over fear every single day, choosing to trust God's plan even when the path ahead seems unclear. It's in the midst of the storm, when the winds of fear are howling, that we have the opportunity to declare that God's plan will prevail. And when we do, we find that our faith, not our fear, becomes the thing that defines us, strengthens us, and carries us through. In that moment, as fear threatened to overtake, faith took its place. And through that faith, the message was amplified, becoming not just words, but a living testimony of God's power to overcome anything that tries to bring us down. Fear may come, but it will never have the final say when we stand firm in faith, trusting in God's plan, His love, and His strength to carry us through every challenge. In the face of uncertainty, when the road ahead is unclear and the challenges seem too great to overcome, there is a peace that surpasses all understanding. It's a peace that isn't found in the absence of difficulty, but in the presence of a faith that knows deep down that God is in control. We are often faced with situations where the outcome is unknown, where our circumstances seem overwhelming, and where fear and doubt can easily take root. But it is in these moments of uncertainty that faith becomes the anchor that holds us steady. Faith doesn't promise that everything will be easy, but it promises that we will not face the storm alone. When the weight of the world feels too heavy, when we are faced with challenges that seem insurmountable, it's easy to feel like we are lost, like we are wandering in the dark. But faith, real faith, gives us a different perspective. It allows us to see beyond the uncertainty, to trust in a plan that we may not fully understand but know is still unfolding. It's in these times that we are called to hold on to the truth that God's love is constant, His presence is ever near, and His plan is greater than anything we could imagine. The power of faith is that it provides a peace that doesn't depend on the circumstances around us. It's not about having everything figured out. It's about knowing that we don't have to have all the answers because we serve a God who does. In the face of uncertainty, faith doesn't shrink back, it rises. It says, even when I can't see the way, I know that God is working. Even when I'm not sure of what comes next, I trust that He is guiding me. That kind of peace doesn't come from our own understanding. It comes from the trust we place in God's eternal wisdom. In times of uncertainty, we don't have to have everything figured out in order to move forward. Sometimes the biggest step of faith is just taking the next step, trusting that God will guide us every step of the way. Even when the situation feels overwhelming, even when the path ahead is clouded with doubt, we can have peace knowing that we don't have to walk alone. Faith allows us to rest in the assurance that God is already ahead of us, preparing the way, opening doors, and providing for every need. It's easy to let fear and doubt take over when we can't see the outcome. We can find ourselves paralyzed by the unknown, caught in the grip of worry and anxiety. But peace doesn't come from having all the answers or from knowing what the future holds. Peace comes from knowing that God's plan is already in motion. Faith is the bridge that connects us to that peace. It's in the trust that God is working behind the scenes, even when we can't see what's happening, that we find the strength to keep moving forward. Faith teaches us that uncertainty is not a place of despair, but a place of opportunity. It's in the unknown that we can discover the depth of God's faithfulness. When we feel overwhelmed, when the path ahead is unclear, God's peace is available to us, a peace that fills the spaces of uncertainty with the assurance that everything is in his hands. We don't have to have control over every situation. We simply need to trust the one who is in control. When we choose faith over fear, we choose peace in the midst of the storm. We choose to believe that, even in the darkest moments, God is with us, guiding us and strengthening us. It's in the uncertainty that we can experience the fullness of his peace. And while we may not always understand the reasons for the trials we face, we can trust that God is using every moment to shape us, to grow our faith, and to bring us closer to his purpose. In these times, it's important to remember that peace isn't the absence of turmoil, it's the presence of trust. It's the ability to stand firm even when the world around us is shifting. Faith allows us to walk through the storm with our heads held high, knowing that our peace comes from something greater than our circumstances. When everything around us feels uncertain, we can rest in the certainty of God's love, knowing that his plan will always prevail. Healing is not just a process, it's a promise. It is a divine gift that touches every part of our lives, not just the body, but the soul, the mind, and the spirit. When we face trials, whether they are physical, emotional, or spiritual, we are reminded that God is a healer. He doesn't just heal the visible wounds, he heals the unseen wounds, the ones we carry deep within, the ones we often try to hide from the world. True healing comes when we allow God to touch every aspect of our being, when we invite his restorative power into the depths of our hearts. In times of struggle, it's easy to focus only on the physical, the pain we can see and feel. But healing is so much more than that. It's the restoration of peace, the renewal of strength, and the renewal of purpose. It's about the wholeness that comes from God's touch in every area of our lives. And just as we trust him to heal our bodies, we must also trust him to heal our hearts and our minds. Healing is a holistic journey, and in his presence we find restoration in every part of our being. The call for healing is not just for the physical body, but for the spirit that has been broken by disappointment, the mind that has been clouded by doubt, and the soul that longs for peace. God is not just concerned with our outer appearance, he is deeply invested in our inner well-being. His desire is for us to experience healing in every area of life, to be restored to the fullness of who he has created us to be. It is his will that we walk in wholeness, not just in one aspect, but in all aspects of our lives. In this moment of uncertainty, when we may feel broken or weary, we must remember that God is the ultimate healer. He sees the invisible wounds, the hurts that others can't see, and he is waiting to pour out his healing power. Whether it's physical healing for the body, emotional healing for the heart, or spiritual healing for the soul, God's power is able to reach every part of us, and he is always faithful to restore us, to mend the broken places, and to make us whole again. The power of prayer is not just about asking for healing, it's about believing that God has already provided for it. When we pray for healing, we align ourselves with God's will for wholeness and restoration. We trust that he has the power to heal, to restore, and to make all things new. It's not always an instant process, but it's a journey that requires faith, patience, and trust in God's perfect timing. Healing is often a process of surrender, of allowing God to work in his way, in his time, and in his strength. The call for healing goes beyond just the individual. It's a call for the community. Healing happens not just when we pray alone, but when we come together as a body, lifting each other up in faith. There is power in collective prayer, in standing together and believing that God will heal not just one person, but an entire community. When we unite in prayer, we create an atmosphere where healing can flow freely, where every need is met, and where the presence of God brings restoration to all. In moments like these, we are reminded of the importance of spiritual healing. Sometimes the greatest healing is not physical, it is spiritual. It is when we are restored to the fullness of our purpose, when we are reminded of who we are in God, and when we are in God, and when we experience his presence in a deeper way. Spiritual healing aligns us with God's will, reawakens our faith, and restores our sense of peace and purpose. It is the healing that equips us to face life's challenges with strength and courage, knowing that we are not fighting alone. This event has served as a powerful reminder that healing is not just a one-time event, it is an ongoing process. It is a continuous flow of God's grace and mercy that touches every area of our lives. We are called to pray for healing, to believe in healing, and to walk in the fullness of that healing every day. God is the ultimate healer, and he desires to restore every part of us, bringing us back to the place of wholeness and peace that he has always intended for us. So let us continue to pray for healing in all areas of life. Let us seek healing not just for our bodies, but for our minds, our spirits, and our relationships. And let us believe that God is able to restore, renew, and make all things new. For with God, there is nothing too broken that he cannot heal, nothing too lost that he cannot find, and nothing too impossible that he cannot make possible. Healing is his promise to us, and it is a promise that is always available to those who trust in his power and his love. There are moments in life that serve as profound reminders of the grace of God, the power of prayer, and the resilience of the human spirit. When we are faced with unexpected challenges, it is easy to feel as though the road ahead is too difficult to navigate, that the obstacles in front of us are insurmountable. Yet, in the midst of adversity, we find that God's grace is sufficient. His strength is made perfect in our weakness, and with the support of a community that stands together in faith, there is nothing we cannot overcome. The return to the pulpit after a time of recovery is not just a personal triumph, it's a testimony of the power of God's sustaining grace. It's a living example of how prayer can move mountains, how faith can heal, and how we can overcome even the most challenging of circumstances. It's a reminder that no matter how difficult the journey, we do not walk it alone. We are surrounded by the love and prayers of others, and with God's grace, we are empowered to rise above our trials. Health is not something to be taken for granted. It is a gift, a precious blessing that we must cherish and protect. When our health is threatened, we are reminded of how fragile life can be. But in those moments of vulnerability, we also realize the incredible power, healing that flows from God. His desire is not for us to remain in a state of sickness or struggle, but to walk in wholeness and vitality. And as we pray for healing, we are reminded of the importance of taking care of our bodies, honoring the temple that God has entrusted to us. Our health is not only a physical concern, but a spiritual one, as it enables us to fulfill our purpose and carry out the work God has called us to do. The journey to recovery is often not a quick one, but it is one that is marked by growth, reflection, and strength. Every day of healing is a day to witness the power of God's faithfulness. Every step taken toward recovery is a step that brings us closer to the realization that with God, nothing is impossible. It is through the trials that our faith is strengthened, and it is through the healing process that we learn to trust God more deeply, to lean on him more fully, and to rely on his power to carry us through. The strength to overcome any obstacle comes not from our own abilities, but from the grace of God that empowers us to press on. There will always be challenges in life, things that threaten to knock us down, things that make us question our strength and our purpose. But as we lean on God's grace, we find that we are stronger than we ever imagined. The obstacles that once seemed impossible to overcome become stepping stones to greater faith, greater resilience, and greater understanding of the power of God at work in our lives. In the face of hardship, it is often the support of our community that carries us through. There is a strength that comes from knowing that we are not alone, that there are people praying for us, standing with us, and believing with us for healing and restoration. The prayers of a community are powerful, and they create an atmosphere where God's healing power can flow freely. It's through the support of others that we are reminded of God's love and care, and it is through their faith that we find the courage to keep going, even when the road is difficult. The return to the pulpit is not just a physical recovery, but a spiritual one as well. It is a reaffirmation of God's call, a reminder that the work he has begun in us, he will see through to completion. It is a powerful declaration that no matter what trials we face, God's purpose for our lives will not be thwarted. We are never too broken, too weak, or too far gone for God to restore and use us for his glory. Through his grace, we can always rise again, stronger, more faithful, and more determined to carry out the work he has entrusted to us. As we reflect on the journey of recovery, we are reminded that life is a constant process of growth and healing. There will always be setbacks, but with God's grace, we can move forward with confidence, knowing that he is with us every step of the way. The power of prayer, the importance of health, and the strength to overcome any obstacle are all gifts that God has given us. And as we walk in faith, we know that no matter what challenges may come our way, we have the strength to face them, knowing that God is our healer, our provider, and our sustainer. This moment serves as a powerful reminder to us all that no matter the challenges we face, there is always hope, always grace, and always the strength to overcome. With prayer, faith, and the support of our community, we can rise above any obstacle and continue moving forward in the purpose and calling God has placed on our lives. Thanks for watching.